Yashoda Beolukaladavamanam Param Rishtva Matyanta Todrutya Gopya Rudantamuhu netra yugman mrijantam Karam bhuja yugmena satanka netram Muhushvasakam patre rekanka kantam Sita Graivadam Odaram Bhaktivedam Iti Driksvalila Birananda Kunde Svagosham Nimajantam Akyapayantam Tadiye geshu taktai jitatvam Puna prematastam shata vritti vande Param deva moksham na moksham vademvam Nachanyam vrineam vadeshadapiham Idam teva purnata gopala balam Sadame manasya virashtam kimanyam Idam te mukham bojam atyantanilad Vritam kundalai stingdaraktaischa gopyam Muchumbitam bimbaraktadarame Manasya virashtamalam lakshalabhai Namo Deva Damodarananta Vishnu Praseda Prabhu Dukha Jalabdi Magnam Vipadriste Vreshyante Dinam Bhatanu Vihane Shama Magya Medyakshidishya Kuveratma Jauvada Mrutyai Vayadvat Vayamochitau Bhakti Bhajau Kritau Cha Tata prema bhaktim svakame prayacha Namokshe graho mesti damodareham Namaste stu dhamne spuradipti dhamne Dadi yodarayata vishvasya dhamne Namo Radhikayai Tvadiya Priyayai Namo Nantalilaya Devaya Tubhyam Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayo Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radhe Jayo Radha Damodara Radhe Damodara Radhe. To the Supreme Lord, whose form is the embodiment of eternal existence, knowledge and bliss, whose sharp-shaped earrings are swinging to and fro, who is beautifully shining in the divine realm of Gokula, who, due to the offense of breaking the pot of yogurt that his mother was churning into butter, and then stealing the butter that was kept hanging from a swing, is quickly running from the wooden grinding mortar in fear of Mother Yashoda, but who has been caught from behind by her who ran after him with great speed. To that Supreme Lord, Sri Damodar, I offer my humble obeisances. Seeing the whipping stick in his mother's hand, he is crying and rubbing his eyes again and again with his two lotus hands. His eyes are filled with fear, and the necklace of pearls around his neck, which is marked with 3 lines like a conch shell, is shaking because of his quick breathing due to crying. To this Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, whose belly is bound not with ropes but with his mother's pure love, I offer my humble obeisances. By such childhood pastimes as this, he is drowning the inhabitants of Gokula in pools of ecstasy, and it's revealing to those devotees who are absorbed in knowledge of his supreme majesty and opulence that he is only conquered by devotees whose pure love is imbued with intimacy and it's free from all conceptions of awe and reverence. With great love, I again offer my obeisances to Lord Damodar, hundreds and hundreds of times. O Lord, although you are able to give all kinds of benedictions, I do not pray to you for the boon of impersonal liberation, nor the highest liberation of eternal life in Vaikuntha, nor any other boon which may be obtained by executing 9 processes of bhakti. O Lord, I simply wish that this form of yours as Bala Gopala in Vrindavan may ever be manifest in my heart, for what is the use to me of any other boon besides this? O Lord, your lotus face, which is encircled by locks of soft black hair tinged with red, is kissed again and again by Mother Yashoda, and your lips are reddish like the bimba fruit. May this beautiful vision of your lotus face be ever manifest in my heart. Thousands and thousands of other benedictions are of no use to me. O Supreme Godhead, I offer my obeisances to you. O Damodar, O Ananta, O Vishnu, O Master, O my Lord, be pleased upon me. By showering your glance of mercy upon me, deliver this poor ignorant fool who is immersed in an ocean of worldly sorrows and become visible to my eyes. O Lord Damodar, just as the 2 sons of Kuvera Manigriva and Nalakuvara were delivered by the curse of Narada and made into great devotees by you in your form as a baby tied with a rope to a wooden grinding mortar, in the same way, please give to me your own Prema Bhakti. I only long for this and have no desire for any kind of liberation. O Lord Damodar, I first of all offer my obeisances to the brilliantly effulgent robe which binds your belly. I then offer my obeisances to your belly, which is the abode of the entire universe. I humbly bow down to your most beloved Srimati Radharani, and I offer all obeisances to you, the Supreme Lord, who displays unlimited pastimes. Shri Radha Damodar Ki.
Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine
Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Vedanta Swami Iti Nama
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Jai Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 बोलिए बोलिए हरे राम 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 हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Rasbihari Radha Rasbihari Radhe Jaya Radha Rasbihari Radha Rasbihari.
Hare Krishna. On behalf of devotees at Hare Krishna land, Juhu, Mumbai, we welcome His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj. His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj ki. Welcome back home, back to Bombay over Zoom, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Today is the auspicious occasion of Sri Rama Ekadasi. It is very significant for devotees at ISKCON and specifically devotees at Hare Krishna land, Juhu, Mumbai, because in 1974, on November 10, same Rama Ekadasi day, Srila Prabhupada completed the Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. Sri Caitanya Caritamrta ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. So Srila Prabhupada wrote an elaborate concluding words to his Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, in which he actually recollects his first meeting with his Guru Maharaj, his Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada, and also he writes elaborately about his association with his Guru Maharaj, and he profusely praises the wonderful instruction and the guidance that was given by his Guru Maharaj. It was more or less like, mini Vyasa Puja offering to his Guru Maharaj, and how with his guidance and help he was able to complete the purports to Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. So this is the 47th anniversary. 47 years ago, on this day, Sri Caitanya Caritamrita was completed. So, even though His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj is far away, sitting on the other side of the planet, and he certainly is very close to our heart. Whenever any occasion in Hare Krishna land is happening, he is always thinking about us. Thank you very much, Maharaj, and also we are very thankful to you to having accepted our invitation to give your association today. Srila Prabhupada Leela is very sweet, and his Leela in Hare Krishna land is much sweeter, very special Leela, and that Leela is narrated by His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj is very special. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam sukhamukat amrita drava samvitam. Srimad Bhagavatam is very sweet, and when it comes from the lotus mouth of Sukadeva Goswami, it is much sweeter. So in this way, today we have His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj, who was very much part of this entire pastime of Srila Prabhupada in Hare Krishna land. So his narrating will be much, much sweeter. So he is Sukadeva of Juhu pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. So thank you very much, Maharaj, once again for accepting our invitation. And with that short introduction, I request His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj to give a special lecture on the concluding words to Sri Caitanya Caritamrita purpose by Srila Prabhupada. His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj.
Explain the way it usually does, the way I think it.
Audio. Maharaj, we are not able to hear you. Your audio is...
Can you hear me?
Little better one, little bit more volume, closer to the mic, Maharaj.
What about now?
Yes, yes, Maharaj.
Okay. Wonderful. So nice to see you right by Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa-san. So I will lead the Mangalacharana prayers. Sing the Mangalacharana prayers and lead a short kirtan, and then speak about Sri Rama Ekadasi and Srila Prabhupada's concluding words. Vande Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsa Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Caitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tirunamalaya Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivedanta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Pariprajapacharya Stotra Satasri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Samstapakacharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Pariprajapacharya Stotra Satasri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Amacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, my dear devotees on Zoom, as far as possible, I request you to put your cameras on so we can see your moon-like faces. It will be more personal. Thank you. Rajman, there's another problem. You know, when I go down here. Oh, there it is. There it is. Oh. Right. Hare Krishna. So today, Sri Rama Ekadasi is a very special day. It is the first Ekadasi in the month of Kartik or Damodar. And as we heard, it has special significance as the day on which Srila Prabhupada completed his translation of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, the most important book on the life and precepts of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Every devotee should read it. Actually, every devotee should read every book of Srila Prabhupada. Sri Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita as it is, the devotion, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sri Chaitanya Caritamrita. Although Sri Chaitanya Caritamrita covers a wide range of topics, it's a very advanced book of study. And we will read from it. Jaya 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 Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. All glories to Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All glories to Lord Nityananda. All glories to Advaita Chandra. And all glories to all the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So on this date, in Rama Ekadasi in 1974, I went up the stairs to Srila Prabhupada's quarters in the F block at the back of the Juhu property. It was usual for us to go every morning at 6 o'clock to accompany Srila Prabhupada for his walk on Juhu Beach. But this time we were surprised to find that the door was locked. In fact, both doors, to his quarters and to his staff's quarters, were locked. And we could not understand why. We knocked, and eventually Srila Prabhupada's secretary, Hare Das, opened the staff's door and told us that Srila Prabhupada had just completed the translation of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, that he had written the most beautiful glorification of his Guru Maharaj at the end, that he was in a very jubilant mood, and that he said we should celebrate by having a feast.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes?
Your audio input is very low here, Maharaj. If the mic can be a little closer, it will be better, Maharaj.
Okay. How is it now?
Better, Maharaj.
Okay, I'll come even closer.
Thank you, Maharaj.
But I'm going to repeat what I just said because it's very important. In case, some devotees couldn't hear it. So on this date, Sri Rama Ekadasi in 1974, we went up the stairs to Srila Prabhupada's quarters in the F block, the back of the Juhu property. It was usual for us to go every morning at 6 o'clock to accompany Srila Prabhupada for his walk on Juhu Beach. But this time we were surprised to find that the doors were locked, both doors, to his quarters and to his staff's quarters were locked. And we could not understand why. We knocked, and eventually Srila Prabhupada's secretary, Harikesh Das, opened the staff's door and told us that Srila Prabhupada had just completed his translation of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, that he had written the most beautiful glorification of his Guru Maharaj at the end, that he was in a very jubilant mood, and that we should celebrate by having a feast. Now we shall read Srila Prabhupada's concluding words. Concluding words. Today, Sunday, November 10th, 1974, corresponding to the 10th of Kartik, Caitanya era 488, the 11th day of the dark fortnight, the Rama Ekadasi. We have now finished the English translation of Sri Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami's Sri Caitanya Caritamrita in accordance with the authorized order of His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur, my beloved eternal spiritual master, guide, and friend. So from the very beginning, Srila Prabhupada is setting the theme of following the order of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj. Back to the purports. Although according to material vision, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, passed away from this material world on the last day of December 1936, I still consider His Divine Grace to be always present with me by His Vani, His words. There are two ways of association, by Vani and by Vapu. Vani means words, and Vapu means physical presence. Physical presence is sometimes appreciable and sometimes not, but Vani continues to exist eternally. Therefore, we must take advantage of the Vani at the physical presence. The Bhagavad Gita, for example, is the Vani of Lord Krishna. Although Krishna was personally present 5,000 years ago and is no longer physically present from the materialistic point of view, the Bhagavad Gita So again, Srila Prabhupada set the theme for his concluding words in the very first sentence by saying that he completed his translation of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita in accordance with the authorized order of His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj. Order, the instruction, words, the body. Although Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur had passed away on the last day of December 1956, Srila Prabhupada was still connected with him by serving as instruction. Almost 40 years after his Guru Maharaj disappeared, Srila Prabhupada was pleased to offer him his translation of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. In other words, his relationship with his spiritual master was not diminished by the passing of time, as the association of Vani and Srila Prabhupada's dedication to his translation of Srimad Bhagavatam, he wrote, "To my eternal spiritual master, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj. He lives eternally by his divine instructions. The follower lives." So we never need to feel bereft of the association with the spiritual master of the life, because their association is always available through their words. And as Srila Prabhupada wrote, must take advantage. For example, Srila Prabhupada's Vani is available in his books. So we have to take advantage of his books. If we don't read his books, we don't study his books, if we don't discuss his books, how will we have his association? We want his association. A householder devotee in England told me that he was concerned about his son. Not only his son, but also many others of the congregation. Because his son was focused only on his immediate authority in Krishna consciousness, whom he accepted as his devotee was concerned that his son should also develop a relationship with Srila Prabhupada, understanding that everything in ISKCON, including Prabhupada's disciples, was the result of Prabhupada's mercy. He felt that his son should have a proper, tangible, substantial relationship with Srila Prabhupada. So the father prevailed upon the son to start listening to Srila Prabhupada's tapes and reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And that boy started to awaken his relationship with Srila Prabhupada in a very tactful way. Hadn't understood it before. Hadn't understood that you could have a tangible, substantial relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Even in Prabhupada's physical separation, by hearing his words, reading his books. And then Srila Prabhupada started to come in his dreams. The boy was very pure, is very pure. In his teens, he went to Vrindavan and joined the 24-hour kirtan party. He was ready to live the rest of his life in Vrindavan. In particular, he was a very good mridanga player. So he had a dream in which the deity of Srila Prabhupada sitting on his Vyasasana in Vrindavan came to life. Many devotees have had dreams in which Prabhupada comes to life. And he had another dream in which Srila Prabhupada was standing at the entrance to the temple room at Bhaktivedanta Manor, observing all the youth, including him, through a kirtan. After the kirtan, Srila Prabhupada walked over to him and said, "It is very good that you are engaged in kirtan. However, if one does kirtan simply to attract the opposite sex, this kind of kirtan will take one to the darkest regions of hell." So the boy took the dream as real and took the instruction to heart. And of course, what Srila Prabhupada said is true. This is just one example of how we can establish our relationship with Srila Prabhupada or any of the previous acharyas through Vani, through hearing the words, through reading books. Srila Prabhupada would take rest at about 10 o'clock at night and then wake up at about midnight and translate it. While practically everyone else was sleeping, he was translating for us. He was translating so that we could have these books to study and apply. So it is our duty. It is our privilege. It is a blessing, but it is also our duty to read the books. Otherwise, it means that Srila Prabhupada was wasting his time writing books for us. And we don't even care enough to reciprocate and make the effort to study them. Srila Prabhupada said that we should not only distribute his books, but also he said of his devotees that Sankirtan will keep them happy, and reading his books will keep them. So, we continue with the concluding words. In this connection, we may call to memory the time when I was fortunate enough to meet His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada sometime in the year 1922. Srila Prabhupada had come to Calcutta from Shridham Mayapur to start the missionary activities of the Gaudiya Math. He was sitting in a house at Ottadanga when, through the inducement of an intimate friend, the late Sriman Narendranath Malik, I had the opportunity to meet His Divine Grace for the first time. I do not remember the actual date of the meeting, but at that time I was one of the managers of Dr. Bose's laboratory in Calcutta. I was a newly married young man, addicted to Gandhi's movement, and dressed in khadi. Fortunately, even at our first meeting, His Divine Grace advised me to preach the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in English in the Western countries. Because at that time, I was a complete nationalist, a follower of Mahatma Gandhi's, I submitted to His Divine Grace that unless our country were freed from foreign subjugation, no one would hear the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu seriously. Of course, we had some argument on this subject, but at last I was defeated and convinced that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message is the only panacea for suffering humanity. I was also convinced that the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was then in the hands of a very expert devotee, and that surely the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would spread all over the world. I could not, however, immediately take up his instruction to preach, but I took his words very seriously and was always thinking of how to execute his order, although I was quite unfit to do so. So Srila Prabhupada was the leader of his circle of friends. And thus when Narendranath Malik met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he wanted our Srila Prabhupada also to meet him, to give his verdict about him. Srila Prabhupada also described how across from his home in Calcutta there was a large building with many rooms and many men living there. During the day they would go out and earn money, and then in the evening they would come back and cook and eat their dinner and go to sleep. And then the next morning they would again go out to earn money and come back in the evening. Among them, there was one man who, before going out each morning, would put on the robes of a sadhu and go out and collect money, and later come back, take off his robes, eat with the other karmis, go to sleep, get up in the morning, and go out again. Many sadhus would come to Srila Prabhupada's father's home, and Prabhupada was not very satisfied with their dealings. So when his friend invited him to meet the sadhu, he was not very eager to go, because as there were so many bogus sadhus who were cheating innocent people, he thought that this might be another one. He didn't want to go. But his friend insisted, and ultimately Srila Prabhupada relented and went and met his eternal spiritual master, His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur. When Srila Prabhupada arrived, Srila Saraswati Thakur was sitting on a raised platform, maybe on a cot that was set up as an asana, and everyone else was sitting down. There were some other seats, and Srila Prabhupada sat on one. And from the very first meeting, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ordered him to preach the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the English language throughout the world. As a nationalist and a follower of Mahatma Gandhi, Srila Prabhupada argued, who will listen to India's message, to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message, when India is still under foreign subjugation? Even uncivilized countries like Japan have political independence. First, India should gain political independence, and then people will be ready to hear the message. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did not accept his argument. He said, the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is transcendental. It will act independent of factors such as political independence or dependence. And the world needs the knowledge now. We cannot wait for India's independence. We must present the message now. Srila Prabhupada said that he was defeated in argument by his Guru Maharaj. He said that he had never before been defeated in any argument, but that he had been defeated by his Guru Maharaj, and he was happy about it. Srila Prabhupada was newly married and had a small child, and so he could not take up the order of his spiritual master immediately. But he kept the instruction in his heart and was always thinking about when he would be able to take it up. This is an important lesson for us, that if due to circumstances we are unable to take up an instruction from the spiritual master, we should always keep it in our heart and think of how we can execute it. Pray to be able to execute it and wait for the opportune moment when we will be able to do so. I had an interaction with Srila Prabhupada in 1971, in which he enunciated the same principle. We were in Gorakhpur, staying as guests of Sri Hanuman Prasad Podar and the Gita Press, in what had been Mr. Podar's estate, Sri Krishna Niketan. A new issue of Back to Godhead magazine had arrived with an article that I had written. Srila Prabhupada read the article and called for me. I have read your article, he told me. It is very nice. You should write. And he added, you can travel with me and I will personally instruct you how to write. Some days later, one of the senior devotees, Hangsaduta, wanted to begin his World Sankirtan party. And he asked Srila Prabhupada if he could bring me along. Srila Prabhupada agreed. I was a little disappointed that I wasn't going to travel with Prabhupada and get personal instructions on how to write, but I had faith that whatever he did was ultimately best for all concerned. So I accepted his decision that I go with Hangsadutta. So I went out and bought pens and lined paper. This was before computers. In India, even typewriters were rare. If you needed a document typed, you had to go to the court and find someone outside the courtroom to type your document. But traveling with Hangsadutta, I did not have much time. We had a busy schedule going to Agra and Aligarh. Then Hangsadutta received a telegram from Prabhupada. We are planning a big Pandal program in Bombay. Come with party immediately. So we packed up and came to Bombay. Shamsundar Prabhu was the temple president. He had a meeting with everyone to divide up the duties, and he asked me to collect advertisements for the souvenir magazine to raise funds for the Pandal program. I told him that Srila Prabhupada had instructed me to write as my main business. Shamsundar said, "You can write any time, but this is a special occasion. One time when we can go into any man's office in Bombay and ask him to give an advertisement for the souvenir. We need to get advertisements to raise funds for the Pandal. So do this now, and you can take up your writing later." I thought that what he said made sense, and I also knew that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to cooperate with our authorities. So I agreed. Then, some days later, Srila Prabhupada arrived. And as usual, all the disciples entered his sitting room with him, and he glanced around the room at each disciple, maybe exchanging a few words. When he came to me, he said, "So, Giriraj, how is your writing going?" I was completely flustered. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to speak, but nothing was coming out. Srila Prabhupada said, "Okay, we'll discuss later." After a while, he called for me. I was alone in the room with him, and he asked me, "So what about your writing?" I was in anxiety because I wasn't sure if I had done the right thing. But I explained what Shamsundar Prabhu had said and how it made sense to me, and also how I knew Srila Prabhupada wanted us to cooperate with our authorities. So I thought I should cooperate. "Did I do the right thing?" I asked. And he replied, "One can temporarily suspend the order of the spiritual master, but one can never neglect it." And then he gave his own example. Like me, my Guru Maharaj also instructed me to write, but I'm so busy traveling in India, I hardly have time to write. You can suspend the order of the spiritual master, but you can never neglect it. So now back to the concluding words. I could not, however, immediately take up his instructions to preach, but I took his words very seriously and was always thinking of how to execute his order, although I was quite unfit to do so. In this way, I passed my life as a householder until 1950, when I retired from family life as a vanaprastha. With no companion, I loitered here and there until 1958, when I took sannyas. Then I was completely ready to discharge the order of my spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada has described how he would have dreams in which his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur, would come to him and call him to follow him. Srila Prabhupada would wake up in anxiety because he would think, oh, Guru Maharaj is calling me to follow him. He wants me to preach. He wants me to leave my family. And he was in a panic because he was thinking, how can I leave my family? How can I live alone? Then one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers, a fellow disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, His Holiness Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj, encouraged him, you should take sannyas. You cannot really take up the order of Guru Maharaj to preach unless you take sannyas. When that godbrother passed away in 1968, Srila Prabhupada gave a nice talk about him, saying how that godbrother had forced him to take sannyas. Quote, actually, he did not force me to take sannyas, Prabhupada said. My Guru Maharaj forced me to take sannyas through my godbrother. So this is another instruction that a sincere disciple can receive instructions from his spiritual master through others. And I had one experience with Srila Prabhupada, and I think for the sake of time, I won't describe everything that happened, but the conclusion was that Tamal Krishna Goswami had given me an instruction that I didn't want to follow for various reasons. And then Srila Prabhupada called the two of us into his room. And he spoke in such a way to convey the idea that that Tamal Krishna Goswami's that my reluctance to follow Tamal Krishna Goswami's instruction was actually a lack of surrender to Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada wanted me to understand that he could be giving me orders or instructions through others, that the orders or instructions didn't have to come through him directly. And he manifested that mood in relation to his godbrother, Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj. My Guru Maharaj forced me to take sannyas through my godbrother. So back to the concluding words. After he passed away, I started the fortnightly magazine Back to Godhead sometime in 1944 and tried to spread the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through this magazine. After I took sannyas, a well-wishing friend suggested that I write books instead of magazines. Magazines, he said, might be thrown away, but books remain perpetually. So here's another example. He took the advice of a friend very seriously because the friend's advice was in support of his spiritual master's instruction. And there was another case when Srila Prabhupada's friend in Bombay, Sri Bridgerton Mota, suggested to Srila Prabhupada that he serialize the Bhagavad Gita in Back to Godhead magazine. And Srila Prabhupada took the advice. Although he chose not to serialize the Bhagavad Gita, but to serialize Srimad Bhagavatam. Until today, there's an excerpt from Srimad Bhagavatam in every issue of Back to Godhead magazine. And that suggestion came from Sri Brijajan Mota. So back to the concluding words. Then I attempted to write Srimad Bhagavatam. Before that, when I was a householder, I had written on Srimad Bhagavad Gita and had completed about 1,100 pages. But somehow or other, the manuscript was stolen. In any case, when I had published Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, in 3 volumes in India, I thought of going to the USA. By the mercy of His divine grace, I was able to come to New York on September 17th, 1965. Since then, I've translated many books, including Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, a summary, and many others. In the meantime, I was induced to translate Sri Caitanya Caritamrita and publish it in an elaborate version. In his leisure time in later life, His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would simply read Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. It was his favorite book. He used to say that there would be a time when foreigners would learn the Bengali language to read the Caitanya Caritamrita. The work on this translation began about 18 months ago. Now, by the grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it is finished. In this connection, I have to thank my American disciples, especially Shriman Pradumya Das Adhikari, Shriman Nitai Das Adhikari, Shriman Jayadwaita Das Brahmachari, and many other boys and girls who are sincerely helping me in writing, editing, and publishing all these literatures. So, yeah, Srila Prabhupada was, he was not taking credit for himself. He gave credit to his Guru Maharaj and even to his disciples who were helping him. So now we come to the penultimate paragraph, the second to the last paragraph in the concluding words. And this is revolutionary. So please listen carefully. Concluding words, continued. I think that His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, is always seeing my activities and guiding me within my heart by His words. As it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye. Spiritual inspiration comes from within the heart, wherein the Supreme Personality of Godhead in His Paramatma feature is always sitting with all His devotees and associates. We all accept that Krishna is in the heart. It is a basic instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivisto. But here Srila Prabhupada says that his translation of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita was guided by his spiritual master within the heart. Now, of course, Srila Prabhupada received the instruction to write in English from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and kept that instruction in his heart. But here, Prabhupada seems to be saying more, that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was actually sitting in his heart as one of the associates of the Super Soul, and from within the heart could give active, dynamic guidance. Back to the concluding words. It is to be admitted that whatever translation work I have done is through the inspiration of my spiritual master. Because personally, I am most insignificant and incompetent to do this materially impossible work. Once, when Srila Prabhupada was being interviewed by a newspaper reporter in America, after having published so many books in such a short time, he said that actually he hadn't written the books. Krishna had. The newspaper reporter was a little confused about what that meant. And one of Prabhupada's disciples explained that Prabhupada had meant that Krishna had given him the intelligence to write the books. But Srila Prabhupada said, no, Krishna wrote directly. And Prabhupada would read his own books. Any ordinary author, when he writes a book, that's the end of it. He doesn't read the book he just wrote. What author reads his own books? Only if the subject is transcendental will an author read his own books. Shrutakirti Prabhu went into Srila Prabhupada's room one day when Prabhupada was reading Krishna book. These books are so wonderful, Prabhupada said. If you just read this book, Krishna, you can become completely Krishna conscious. Then he said, not even the whole book. If you read just one chapter, you can become completely Krishna conscious. And then he said, not even one chapter. If you read one page, you can become completely Krishna conscious. Not even a page. If you read just one paragraph, you can become completely Krishna conscious. Not even a paragraph. If you read just one sentence, you can become completely Krishna conscious. Because these books are Krishna. They are written by Krishna or Krishna's pure devotee, and they are Krishna. You're associating with Krishna. By associating with Krishna, you can become fully Krishna conscious, which is what we are meant to do. So back to the concluding words. It is to be admitted that whatever translation work I have done is through the inspiration of my spiritual master. Because personally, I am most insignificant and incompetent to do this materially impossible work. I do not think myself a very learned scholar, but I have full faith in the service of my spiritual master. His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur. If there is any credit to my activities of translating, it is all due to His Divine Grace. So Srila Prabhupada is not taking any credit for himself. He's giving all credit to his spiritual master. And back to the concluding words. Certainly, if His Divine Grace were physically present at this time, it would have been a great occasion for jubilation. But even though He is not physically present, I am confident that He is very much pleased by this work of translation. He was very fond of seeing many books published to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Therefore, our society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, has been formed to execute the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur. So we come back to the theme of the order of the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada began by saying that he translated Sri Caitanya Caritamrita under the authorized instruction of his spiritual master. Now he is saying that he formed the International Society for Krishna Consciousness to execute the order of his spiritual master and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What order? The order to print and distribute books. There are other orders, of course, but specifically here, Srila Prabhupada is focusing on the order to print and distribute books. So back to the concluding words. It is my wish that devotees of Lord Chaitanya all over the world enjoy this translation. So the same thing, we shouldn't just distribute the books, we should also read them. We should relish them, we should enjoy them, and we should make our lives one with them. So, it is my wish that devotees of Lord Chaitanya all over the world enjoy this translation, and I am glad to express my gratitude to the learned men in the Western countries who are so pleased with my work that they are ordering in advance all my books that would be published in the future. On this occasion, therefore, I request my disciples who are determined to help me in this work, and we're all Prabhupada's disciples. Some are Shiksha disciples and some are Diksha disciples. On this occasion, therefore, I request my disciples who are determined to help me in this work to continue their cooperation fully, so that philosophers, scholars, religionists, and people in general all over the world will benefit by reading our transcendental literatures, such as Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. Thus, on the Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, dated November 10th, 1974, at the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, Hare Krishna Land, Juhu, Bombay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai. So, my dear devotees, thank you for joining us for this most auspicious celebration of Sri Rama Ekadasi. And I'm not sure about what the temple schedule is right now in Juhu, whether there's time for questions and comments or whether we should just conclude now.
We can take some questions, Maharaj. On the Zoom, if anybody has question, please raise your hand electronically. On the temple, anybody has any question?
Or comment, reflection.
Nimai Nithai Prabhu sitting in Juhu temple, he has something to say.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much. Maharaj, in the beginning you were mentioning that when Srila Prabhupada was defeated by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his first meeting with Saraswati Thakur, so Srila Prabhupada concluded that the message of Lord Chaitanya is in the right hands. So just had a query that Srila Prabhupada was a new boy. So how was he confident that, how did he knew Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy so that he can testify that, okay, it is in the right hands?
Srila Prabhupada was very intelligent, and he could recognize, even from the very first meeting, that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was an expert devotee, and that the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in the right hands. Yeah, I don't think it's a question of being new. I mean, when we surrender to a spiritual master, we're all new. But Krishna gives us the intelligence that this is the right person to whom I must surrender. And Srila Prabhupada was very intelligent, and he could understand Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's position. Is that all right?
Nobody else is there. Thank you. Thank you very much, Maharaj. Maharaj, one more question if you permit.
Yes.
Maharaj, you were mentioning that Srila Prabhupada told you that the disciple can temporarily keep aside the order of Guru but never neglect. So some devotee may be there whose circumstances, who has some order of spiritual master, but circumstances are such that continuously he has to sideline it or like keep it aside for long time. At that time he goes through difficulty that internally he is feeling pulled towards towards fulfilling the order of spiritual master, but the current circumstances are not allowing him. Long time is going, so then what he should be doing in that situation? Thank you, Maharaj.
That reminds me of myself. Because Srila Prabhupada instructed me to write, and I was writing articles for Back to Godhead magazine, but I wasn't writing any books, and I knew that he wanted me to write books as well. And then, and the reason was, I was so busy traveling and preaching, and I was a GBC, and I was having meetings and managing and preaching, and I just wasn't finding the time. And then, I guess you could say it was Krishna's mercy. I developed a heart condition. And my cardiologist said, I can't continue the lifestyle that I was leading. I mean, in those days, I'd spend 3 days in one place, 2 days in another place, 1 day in another place. It was really hectic. But with the heart condition, I couldn't do that anymore. And so I made my base here in California, which is where I happened to be when I realized that I had a heart condition. And so it's been very favorable, both for my health and for my writing. So, yeah, sometimes it takes time for the circumstances to change. In that case, I received help from beyond my control. But yeah, it's, temporarily suspend shouldn't go on for too long. Of course, you're speaking about a specific case, and I'm not aware of the details of the case. But certainly he can pray for the opportunity to execute the order that he has been holding in abeyance. Mukunda Madhava, you have the microphone to your mouth. Oh, there we are. You're unmuted. Yeah, you were muted.
Maharaj, there are some hands raised on the Zoom, so you'd like to take some questions from the Zoom.
Okay. I see Siddhi Lala's hand.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I see comment. I just remembered some very fond memories of when you were training me for writing and editing, and you took me to the printers and showed me A to Z how to make a magazine. And the whole cooperative effort of producing a magazine with Ranchur Prabhu and everybody else. Like, I had no idea at all. I was just a schoolgirl practically. And you showed me everything. I learned on the field how to be a layout artist, how to be a designer, how to be a writer and editor. And the most important thing for me is that when I read Prabhupada Lilamrita, the first volume, and I found that everything that you taught me, and it's like what Prabhupada was himself doing. So it's like it's the parampara that you were carrying forward. And Prabhupada didn't give us any instruction that he himself was not doing. And for that, I found that in each and everything that we are doing, his disciples and grand disciples, there's not a single instruction that Prabhupada himself didn't do. So that's the Acharya. This is my appreciation of Srila Prabhupada.
Hi, wonderful, beautiful. Yeah, we have to practice what we preach. I think of a story involving Mahatma Gandhi. A mother brought her son to Mahatma Gandhi and said that my son is eating too many sweets. Tell my son to stop eating sweets. And Mahatma Gandhi said, come back in 2 weeks and I'll tell him. So she came back in 2 weeks and Mahatma Gandhi said to the boy, you should stop eating so many sweets. You should stop eating sweets. And the mother said, well, why didn't you just say that the first time? And Gandhiji said, well, at that time I was eating sweets myself. So how could I tell him not to eat sweets when I myself was eating sweets? So I stopped eating sweets and now I can tell him. Are there any other questions or comments? That was very nice, Siddhi Lalasa. Thank you.
There is one question from the temple, Maharaj. Anshuman Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandat Pranam. Thank you Maharaj for the wonderful class. Maharaj, just one doubt was there in the mind. Means when we see from the Prabhupada life, when he got the direct defeat from the Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he accepted him as a spiritual master at that moment itself. Now, means when I'm talking about myself or in current scene, if we see that in our case, sometimes it happens that initially when we come to Krishna consciousness and when we are exposed to the ISKCON society where so many wonderful Vaishnava Gurus are there, so initially sometimes we are attracted to either kirtan or philosophy or some other things, which for me it seems that they are external, means it depends upon the psychology or the mindset of a person to what he likes, and accordingly he is attracted to some kind of Vaishnava Gurus but it seems to me that they are external. But when means what I read, and that there is already some connection, there is already some attraction is there between the guru and the disciple. So when I am aspiring for someone, or I want to aspire for someone, what should I exactly see, Maharaj?
That's a very good question. One thought that comes to mind is that Hari Bhakti Vilas advises that there should be a mutual testing period of 1 year, during which the disciple observes the prospective guru to be convinced of his position, and the guru observes the prospective disciple to be convinced of his position. And I always suggest that new devotees pray to Srila Prabhupada to guide them to which of his servants that a candidate should accept or approach. Yeah, what you said is true. Some devotee might be attracted to kirtan, and so he might like a guru who leads good kirtan, or he might be attracted to the philosophy, so he might be attracted to a guru who speaks nicely about the philosophy, which is fine. It's all fine. But yeah, one should just, I always say, just pray to Srila Prabhupada for guidance as to whom to approach. And yeah, ultimately Srila Prabhupada is responsible for your spiritual life, and he'll help you. He'll guide you.
Maharaj.
Sundar Chaitanya Prabhu in the temple has a comment or question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for your very insightful, wonderful class. Maharaj, I had one question regarding your telling about the pastime of Prabhupada talking to you regarding following the instructions of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So, I wanted to check that how a devotee creates a harmony in following the instructions of different authorities. Because when we are in Krishna consciousness, we have varieties of devotees which we are serving, and some are spiritually we are connected, some are managerially we are connected, some are little distant, some are close. So when we are staying in the association of devotees with so many seniors, how we make ourselves follow their instructions which will please Prabhupada?
You mean instructions that appear to be contradictory or to conflict with each other?
Yes, yes, Maharaj.
Well, this is a very intelligent question. Such a situation took place in Srimad Bhagavatam. Swayambhuva Manu, the first Manu in this period of time, had a son named Priyavrata. Narada Muni instructed Priyavrata that he should not marry, but should dedicate himself fully to spiritual life. Swayambhuva Manu, however, wanted Priyavrata to marry and take charge of the kingdom. because Swayambhuva Manu himself wanted to retire to enter Vanaprastha ashram. And he needed Priyavrata to manage the kingdom. Now, both were authorities. Not only was Swayambhuva Manu Priyavrata's father, but he's one of the Mahajans, one of the 12 Mahajans, Swayambhu, Narada, Shambhu. Manu is one of the 12. So Priyavrata was in a dilemma because he received one instruction from one bona fide authority and a different instruction from another bona fide authority. What to do? It was a tense situation. Then Lord Brahma came personally. Lord Brahma is also a Mahajan. And he was superior to both Manu and Narada because he is their father. He told Priyavrata that he should marry because his father wanted to renounce his material responsibilities and dedicate himself to God. Priyavrata was in a dilemma. And Srila Prabhupada explains that the disciple must be intelligent enough to reconcile different instructions from bona fide authorities, from the spiritual master and the grand spiritual master. Because Narada was Priyavrata's spiritual master and Brahma was his grand spiritual master. So what did Priyavrata do? Externally, he got married and took charge of the kingdom, but internally he remained detached. So although he could not immediately execute the order to renounce material responsibilities, he always kept it in his heart and abided the time when he could take up the order. Then, when he was sufficiently old and there were others to take charge of the kingdom, he and his wife, who had faithfully assisted him, renounced their material responsibilities, although in a way it was all spiritual, and fully absorbed themselves in God. The Bhagavatam describes that at the end, Priyavrata went home back to Godhead, and his wife also went home back to Godhead. So as Srila Prabhupada said, the disciple has to be intelligent enough to reconcile different bona fide instructions from different bona fide authorities and somehow fulfill the demands of all the instructions of all the authorities. So I hope that this example from Srimad Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada's instructions related to the example will be helpful, because sometimes it does happen. And the other advice, in a practical way, is to have the two authorities get together and speak to each other and come to a conclusion about what you should do, so you're not caught between two conflicting instructions of two bona fide authorities. And let them sort it out between them. And you'll say you'll be happy to do whatever they decide. But you just need to be clear and to receive one instruction that's coming from both of them. That would be perfect. Unmute Mukunda Madhava, please. Mukunda Madhava Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. So please tell us how to conclude the session. Shall we have the darshan of the deities, Maharaj?
Yes.
So we'll have a short kirtan and we'll have the deity darshan of Srila Prabhupada. Shri
Always,
Gaur.
you can see it. Maybe it's not very clear. I always have this picture of Shishi Radharasa Bihari on my table in front of me. I always look at this picture.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyatya Deshatarine Namaste Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Jai Radha Rasbihari Radha Rasbihari Radhe Jaya Radha Rasbihari Radha Rasbihari Radhe Jai Sita Ram Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman Sita Ram Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman Sita Ram Lakshman Bhakta Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Prabhupada
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for giving your association on this very auspicious occasion of Rama Ekadasi, as well as Srila Prabhupada completing his Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Caitanya Caritamrita here in Hare Krishna land. And thank you so much. And I want to convey the message of all the devotees looking forward for your personal association at the earliest convenience of yours.
Yeah, as soon as it's safe, I can't wait to. Bombay, Surat, Delhi, Vrindavan. All right, well, if we're going to end now, then I suggest we conclude with Vaishnava Pranam.
Yes, Maharaj.
Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who are just like desire trees who can fulfill the desires of everyone, and are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakal-
Kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo.
And let us not forget Pune. Pune is also an important stop. Somehow I didn't say it when I gave the last list, but Pune is definitely high on the list. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shri Shri Radha Ras Bihari ji ki, Hare Krishna land ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande.